Final Fantasy IV was the first entry on the Super Nintendo, and the first to have very distinct characters with more prominent personality traits, flaws, and backstories, as well as classes that are more actively encouraged or dictated by the game itself, rather than being completely up to the player. Cecil, the protagonist, is your paladin or warrior type. Kain, his close friend and rival, is your dragoon. Rydia, a child the two saved from a burning village, is your summoner, and so on. It was also the first in the series to introduce active time battles. This style of battle determines the turn order in real time, rather than being one by one. In later games in the series, this is made more clear with a bar that fills up, the speed at which being determined by the character's speed stat. This mechanic is still present in Final Fantasy IV, but the bar isn't visible to the player. This adds a whole new dimension to battles and means that you only have so much time to respond to enemy actions. There's a real dilemma with wanting to make the right decision and wanting to make a fast decision. This is already a concept that exists in JRPG speedrunning, needing to make the fast and correct decision. But in games that are strictly turn-based, it's not enforced by the game itself, it's simply enforced by the concept of a speedrun. This means that for speedrunners now, there's an element of mechanical skill and reactions in battles that result in direct punishment if not executed well. Your characters will take damage and potentially die if you take too long to make a decision, rather than simply losing time finding the right answer. A decent amount of people will still know this game as Final Fantasy II, since it was the second game to be released outside of Japan and was renamed to avoid confusion, but that's a whole other video. This game in particular has a lot of categories on speedrun.com due to the high amount of re-releases that the game has and the differences between them. So to make it a little bit more straightforward, I've broken it down to a sort of primary category for each platform. That being 80% No 64 for the SNES, 80% for the GBA and PSP, 80% for the DS and PC 3D versions, and 80% for the Pixel Remaster. Unfortunately, there are no completionist categories that I can find for this game, like an all bosses or 100% run, so I can't look at optional bosses or super bosses today. Starting with the original SNES release and the No 64 category, the hardest boss for speedrunners is unfortunately the final boss, Zeromus. Now I know it looks like something of a theme in the series so far, but I assure you that not all Final Fantasy speedruns are so stacked at the endgame. To quickly break down the category, it prohibits the use of the 64 floor glitch, which will use 64 screen transitions on specific staircases to corrupt the game's world map, enabling speedrunners to warp to certain areas where they aren't meant to, which includes a credits warp. The category that allows the 64 glitch somewhat fell out of favour after a credits warp was discovered, but according to runners it's pretty sketchy and can actually brick your cartridge, which is kinda scary. This category does allow various skips and an item duplication glitch, but not this specific 64 staircase warp. So anyway, back to the boss. The game plan against Zeromus is relatively simple in premise with a few major hurdles. Zeromus will throw out various attacks, but his main attack, Big Bang, is an AoE that will kill all of your low-level characters in the speedrun. Your main characters should live, but they have a chance to die if you get particularly unlucky. Runners will also need to count damage down to the exact number for these strats to work, which I'll get to in just a moment. I'm going to play the fight in full from the current world record held by Riversmccown and talk about exactly what's going on, as this is a pretty technical fight. To start with, Rosa will cast Berserk on Kain, making him attack repeatedly.
Got it.
Edge will throw some decently strong throwable items as well, and that's about it for phase 1.
2222. 1860. Eight six eight eight. $23.65. $18.30. $18.70.
Phase 2 of the fight begins as Zeromus starts to get closer to his 16,000 HP threshold. When under this amount of health, Zeromus will heal as a counter to any direct attacks. which runners must absolutely avoid.
2260.
When runners start to get near phase 2, they'll actually stop healing the damage taken from Big Bang, and instead cast Reflect on Rosa, letting Kane die so he stops attacking. This is done to change the primary source of damage from Kane's attacks to Rosa casting Holy on herself, bouncing it off of her and onto Zeromus. This makes Holy no longer a direct attack, dodging that healing counter. 2 casts of this are required to kill, but the spell can roll anywhere between 7600 and 9999, so runners need to get a little bit lucky here since 2 damage rolls aren't guaranteed to add up to 16,000.
1397. 1422. Need a big roll here. Okay, I'm gonna go on for it. Need 8285 by my numbers. Yes! Yes!
This is an incredibly technical fight and isn't necessarily guaranteed to be successful, and you can see that energy and relief when Rivers sees that last damage roll and knows the fight's over. The PSP and Game Boy Advance versions of this game are relatively similar, so I've grouped them together for this section. They both have their struggles with Zeromus, but the fight isn't quite as daunting as the Super Nintendo run. The typical strategy is to have the entire party dealing as much damage as they can before they die, and Rydia will bounce magic off of herself with Reflect. This game has incredibly fast ATB bars, so if the runner's execution wasn't on point during the setup, or if they spend too long using the necessary elixir on Rydia to refresh her MP, Reflect can run out early and Rydia will end up just casting a spell on herself and game overing. In terms of the fight that's actually most likely to cause the player to game over, it's not Zeromus, but the Antlion fight earlier in the run. This fight has no safety strats and no room really to sit around and heal. It's basically a damage race that boils down to some good luck on damage rolls. Antlion has 1100 HP. Its pincer attacks will hit for somewhere between 25 and 30, which means Rydia and Edward will die in 2 hits, and Cecil will die in about 10 or 11. Cecil's job is to attack for somewhere between 40 and 60 damage per swing. Rydia will cast Chocobo Kick as many times as she can for about 100 damage per cast, and Edward's job is to get hit by attacks and die, which will let the others do their jobs for longer. This fight isn't hugely deep into the run and not necessarily mechanically challenging at all, but it stands out because no other run in this game is as much of a coin flip as this. From what I can see online, the PSP and Game Boy Advance versions of this game are actually identical outside of minor dialogue improvements and changes to the graphics, which I personally like. The Game Boy Advance leaderboard is unfortunately not very active, and it appears to take down Antlion with the exact same strategies. Onto the 3D version. This is the one that Little Sire sank the most time into as a child, and it's still my favourite version, despite its 12 frames per second battles and other weird aspects of it. It's particularly interesting to me as a speedrun too, because of the mini and reverse glitch. Mini is a status that's very common in the series, especially in earlier entries. It shrinks a party member, resulting in their attack and defense stats dropping. It's typically a debuff that's cast by an enemy, but sometimes has uses. In Final Fantasy III, you can access small areas and caves that the party can't reach at their normal size, and in Final Fantasy VII, it's actually used tactically on a boss that we'll get to in a few videos. The reverse status is significantly less common. I could only find it in 3 Final Fantasy games. When a character has the reverse status, damage will now heal them, and healing will now damage them. The 3D version of Final Fantasy IV has an unfortunate side effect of casting Mini outside of battle, where the target will also unintentionally be granted the reverse status too. This is used on any remotely difficult boss to effectively be invincible for the entire fight, negating their difficulty. This means for the Cagnazzo boss, the time loss comes from what he's casting. Cagnazzo gets 4 actions per turn, and runners are looking to avoid spells. An optimal fight will just be physical attacks and a tsunami here or there, but runners can lose up to 20 seconds immediately if Cagnazzo casts slow, and even more if he casts sleep. Runners will have Tellar and the twins casting spells, and Yang hitting with focus attacks to deal damage. Thanks to the glitch, there's technically no chance of dying in this fight, but the time loss from a poor fight can be so obscene that the run may as well be over. Now I know there's going to be people out there already typing, how can you call that a hard boss? It can't even kill you because of the glitch, so I'll include one that doesn't use the glitch. The Luge fight can make or break any competitive run as well. This boss is scripted to open with Luge getting 2 turns. Turn 1 is guaranteed to be reversal gas, casting reverse on every character, including himself. With Luge now taking damage from healing items, runners would look to throw 2 elixirs on him to end the fight. The issue is Luge's second turn. It's guaranteed that he'll get a second turn before the party can act, but he does have a chance of casting reversal gas a second time, basically undoing that. So now the elixirs won't work for a quick kill. When this happens, the current objective becomes survive. Now that Luge takes damage normally, runners will use a Ramu summon to drop his health low enough for a single elixir to finish the job when Luge eventually casts that reversal gas for a third time. But more often than not, the party gets taken out before they see a third reversal gas. There's really no elegant solution to this. If that second reversal gas gets cast, you're in dire straits, and unfortunately, it's pretty common. And finally, with the Pixel Remaster version, we're headed back to Zeromus, the final boss. The strategy for this fight is really similar to the Final Fantasy III Pixel Remaster's final boss, where runners will repeatedly jump to avoid enemy turns. But remember, this game has ATB gauges, and enemies have them too, we just can't see them. Like the PSP version, this game has incredibly fast ATBs. Just about anything that hits a character in this fight will kill them, aside from Meteor. Runners will throw spiderwebs onto Zeromus to slow him down, and let 4 of their characters die from counters and attacks, leaving only Kain. What you're seeing on screen is the fight as is, but what you're not seeing is a complex series of timing on these jumps to avoid Zeromus' strong spells. While this looks simple, it really isn't. In a lot of Final Fantasy games on ATB wait mode, when targeting an enemy or with the cursor in a menu, ATBs will freeze. This includes the enemy ATBs, and is frequently used in Final Fantasy speedrunning to gain extra turns. In this fight, runners will use this to create timings for jumps. Runners will start by using Zeromus' Shake as a cue for the jump to skip Big Bang. After landing and dealing damage, they're going to wait for another Shake. Zeromus will now be casting Bio alongside Big Bang, so runners can't jump instantly after the Shake, or Kain will be hit with the Bio. Runners need to target Zeromus with a jump, but not confirm it to hold ATBs when they see the Shake. Now to skip the Bio, they need to release the hold for about 0.3 seconds, then input the jump, to ensure that Bio gets skipped as well. Runners unfortunately can't skip Zeromus' heal phase here, so they simply need to let it happen, at which point Zeromus will start throwing down Meteor spells. More ATB waiting needs to be done here, however the timing for how long to hold varies depending on where Kain's ATB is at when the Meteor is cast. Players are now constantly adjusting how long they need to hold this ATB to let it flow and to pause it to avoid Kain taking damage. This phase is short, but significantly more prone to error, and after just a few more jumps, the fight is finally over.
Here, I'm actually gonna hold for like half a second, just in case this doesn't kill. But it did. Let's freaking go. Oh, it's over. Oh, it feels so good. Wow.
This isn't the only hard fight in the game, by the way. There are plenty of mechanically challenging fights, and of course the menuing and movement. So doing a fight this challenging after hours of play is an incredibly daunting concept. Thankfully, a lot of communities have excellent resources and tutorials to make these bosses more digestible and easy to learn. Zik3, who most people know from games like A Bug's Life and the 1 million marathon runs that he's done at various events, happens to also be an excellent Final Fantasy speedrunner who made a tutorial for this fight to break it down in more detail that I'll link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you of course to Zik3, Riversmccown, KaguyaNicky, and Desch for assisting with this video. For these games that I don't personally run, I really need help with like someone to consult on these, so those players were all awesome in terms of helping out there. And of course, thank you to the lovely Patreon subscribers as well. It's $2 a month, you get access to some background, behind the scenes stuff, and also we get to vote on like a monthly challenge speedrun that I do. We recently did Super Mario Bros. 3, which was awesome, and we're doing a vote between some Castlevania games now, which will be happening later in October. So if you do want to support the channel and support the show, your free option is to subscribe, which I really appreciate, and if you do want to throw a few dollars my way, Patreon's an awesome way to do so. But thank you for watching regardless, it means the world. And up next is Final Fantasy V. See you next time.